afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Singapore FinTech Festival once more. And I'm doing my nth number of moderation, but I'm quite happy that I have an opportunity to moderate two leading women from the ASEAN countries. And we're going to talk about technology, finance, leadership. So we have 45 minutes to go. The way we're going to split into 15 minutes around women leadership, 15 minutes around finance, and 15 minutes around technology. And I have two outstanding leaders. We have Serey, the Director General from National Bank of Cambodia, and I have Tanya, Hotchkiss, EVP and CTO, Cantilan Bank of Philippines. So let me start asking both of you a common question. There are, as part of the Singapore FinTech Festival, we have focused on people and talent. And a large part of our focus is also around women leadership. And that's the reason why we have 200 plus women speakers this time at the Singapore FinTech Festival 2020. I want both of you to reflect your own journey as women leaders and what are the opportunities you could take on in your career, challenges you face, and your perspective and what you can inspire many young girls and women around the world who can look at you and find a path for themselves. So I'll start with Serey, and then we'll go to Tanya. Each of you have 5 to 8 minutes to talk through your journey, and then we will take it from there. So Serey, why don't you start?
Yeah, well, thank you, Sopnendu, for the introductions, and really an honor to be here and interviewed by you. I started my journey as an accountant. Always wanted to be an astronaut, but fascinated by X-Files. But my father said this is not a job for a girl, especially somebody from a developing country, because they're not going to launch any missile or satellite soon. So I asked, what does you suggest that I do? And he suggested accounting for girl. It's good because you start at 8 and at 5, and you have a family life, it's office work, etc. And so I started my work at the National Bank of Cambodia as a supervisor at the microfinance for the microfinance institutions. It was really a boring job for me. I didn't like accounting to start with, but I did it because I had to. But I had the opportunity to go and have an on-site visit of one of the microfinance and met with the client. And I realized that my job is not just auditing and making sure that the numbers are right, but also I can, through my job, improve the life of people. I met people who would not be able to send their children to school without the initial loans that was given by a microfinance. So that's really the passion sort of take off from there. And then I moved to the payment system, among other responsibility. And I carry on with me. And so I do my job really out of passions. And the reason why I move into this Bacon project altogether, it started as something for interoperability, but again, I get even more passionate about remittance, etc., because I recently adopted a baby since he was 3 weeks old. He's now 3 years old. And he was born out of a woman who was very, very mentally sick. And then got raped, and so the baby came. And the reason why she got very mentally sick was because she was a migrant worker, and she worked very hard, sent money home to the family. And what happened was that she expected the family to make proper use of the money, and they didn't. The father was an alcoholic, the brother was a drug addict. And eventually when she felt sick and came home, there was nothing left from her hard work. And so she became very depressed, and eventually it's evolved to that. So for me, making sure that migrant workers, especially women, can manage their finance, empower them to be able to manage their finance without depending on a family member. For instance, if she works overseas or work in the city, be able to send money directly to the utility company or directly to the school. That's very important because of this. So a lot of things I do, I really do it out of passion, and that's really driving me every day.
Serey, I want to push a little more on this. Your journey of yours. It looks like your personal story has reflected in your choices of what you do in your life. But there are many women who just can't fight this struggle what one advice you'll give them so that they know how to deal with crisis? Because women tend to have a burden of responsibility of everything in life somehow. So anything you want to suggest from your own career?
I think it's to remain positive. There's a lot of experience that I go through. There's always silver lining. There's always blessing in disguise. Even during COVID, you're going to find a lot of opportunities. So remain positive. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. That's very important. And try to turn this energy or the negativity into something positive and something productive for the societies is crucial. And that's how I turn a lot of my personal stories. I'm not going to share my story here, but turn it into my work with different charitable organizations and trying to link what I see on the ground, the people that I meet, with the work that I'm doing here at the central banking, which it can be very abstract at the central banking level. There's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of things that you talk and people don't understand. And so trying to connect what I see on the ground and what I'm doing in my work and make sure that what I do, what is it relevant for these people? Are these people going to benefit from it? And it's really a blessing for me, really, to be able to connect these two parts together.
Sure. Well, we will move to Tanya, and we'll come back to Serey with a different set of questions. Tanya, your journey, your challenges, and what you want to recommend to many aspiring women and girls as they build their career.
Thank you so much again for this opportunity, Sopnendu, to be here. And again, it's an honor to be in this session moderated by yourself. And it's very nice to meet my fellow session colleague. I really had to think hard about what to say about women leaders. And I say that because I think we take it a lot for granted here in the Philippines, that gender equality when it comes to corporate boardrooms and gender equality when it comes to management is something that we can easily take for granted because it has historically been pretty much at par with what they see in Scandinavia. So I would, the recent figures would show that about close to 50% of management here in the Philippines, management jobs are held by women. And pretty much this is also reflected in corporate boards. And it's been like that for quite some time. We've had 2 women presidents in just the past how many decades? And again, there are a lot of leaders who occupy these types of positions in government and also in private sector that young girls can look up to. Certainly, I don't feel like a pioneer in that aspect because this is something that is something very acceptable and has been for quite some time here in the Philippines. And I sometimes even view it as nothing special. So that's why it took me a while to think about, what my journey was like. But I will probably have to state a little bit about how I got into rural banking. So when I finished my master's in development, innovation and change, it was really more of a macroeconomic kind of level. And I was working for a firm in Manila, and I've always lived in large cities. I used to live in Manila, of course, but also in other parts of the world, in large cities like New York and also Bologna in Italy. So it was quite a change, and my friends thought that I was actually crazy when I told them that I was moving in 2012 to Mindanao. So as you know, Mindanao has a certain connotation, and again, it was, a leap of faith on my part. My father had been with the Rural Bank of Cantilan since 1999 and went through really the development stages and the growth stages of the bank with microfinance as the linchpin. And he challenged me after working in Manila. He challenged me that if I wanted to do real development work and have real impact when it comes to again economic change and changes in society, that this is the place to be, a rural community. So having said that, again, Cantilan is a town that's on the eastern coast of Mindanao, which is the southernmost part, island group of the Philippines. And in Mindanao, that's where you can find 45% of the unbanked towns all over the country. So the levels of disparity in poverty incidence between the larger cities and, of course, the more developed island groups like Luzon, the disparity was quite stark. And we were dealing in some provinces here in Mindanao would see poverty incidence levels that reach up to 50% or more. And these are the things that really interested me and challenged me. And again, this is the most important decision that I ever made in my life, actually moving from the big cities and coming here and understanding that the quality of life is actually better in places like Cantilan, which is a rural town with around 30,000 people in population, and 85% of which are agricultural. So you would see that quite across the entire Mindanao region, where this is where Cantilan Bank operates roughly 46 branches. And it is quite a challenge because I'd like to maybe just share an anecdote where when I joined Cantilan in 2012, it had only been 2 years before that Cantilan had established ATMs for the first time for a lot of the provinces here. So a lot of the provinces here had never had an ATM. And in 2010, Cantilan Bank had a few branches, like 12 branches. We were still using handheld radios for our primary means of communication. So again, the disparity in the lifestyles and the access to infrastructure was quite stark. And again, this is where I felt that impact could still be made. And that's what drew me to this type of work. And it is indeed quite rewarding and satisfying to see how much has developed and grown over just the last 10 years.
Look, both Serey and yourself have established for the audience that you're indeed a path breaker, and you have shifted from a normal path and taken up challenges, which is quite unique in many sense. So I'm going to shift our discussion to the topic of finance. And I'll start with Tanya, then I'll go to Serey. Tanya, let me start with you. I saw one report that Philippines number of your bank, 30% of countries banked, and recently BSP put a target that you want to get to 70% of your population to have a bank account. And before I frame my question, the final question, I did a small research on your product set of your bank, and one product stood out, and I was quite taken back. You have branded a product for the rural bank. You call it premium deposit. Trust me, I'm sure many global audience never could imagine for a rural bank there's a product called premium deposit. I come from Citi I worked at Citibank for 20 years. We used to have premium deposit for wealthy customers. So that's one. And second product I saw in your website is called pension loan. And as you know, globally there is a huge pension gap, $400 trillion pension gap. It's interesting to see a bank like yours has not only thought about a product for irrespective segment, either it is a loan or a student. I saw student loan in the product set. In a way, you have built a comprehensive set of products without worrying about the segment much as traditionally we think. And you have thought about the pension structures and the pension offering. So explain to us about your bank on macro picture about how do you think the world of finance is moving, especially for rural banks, where we should think differently because we should not get prejudiced. We should not have a preset notion about what kind of product a rural bank must have. So please help us to understand this remarkable product that you have and what is the thinking behind it.
Thank you for that question. Well, just to maybe provide a little bit more context, Cantilan is a 40-year-old institution, and starting as really a typical traditional brick and mortar rural bank meant that it was a single unit and it was operating out of the town that you directly serve. and it's usually geared towards farmers, supporting farmers. So that's what it looked like in the 80s. And fast forward 20 years, its first 20 years, it evolved quite slowly. And then in 1999, we started adding microfinance products. So these microfinance products were designed specifically with different market segments in mind. And this is the time that we grew as well, adding in a space of 10 years, in the space of 5 years, we added roughly 20 branches in new locations that we've never served before. And it was through microfinance that we really learned how to listen to the needs of the clients, the needs of the market. And we were able to really offer these types of products, including premium time deposits. So I like how you questioned, again, the ability of a rural bank to offer a premium product. And usually you hear the word premium and you're thinking about, again, the large banks in the world like Citi, and what makes it premium. So in the case of rural banks, this is quite common, not so now, but in the past, it was more common then to offer and entice the market to deposit in a rural bank by offering high interest time deposit products. So an example of that would be 9% or 9.5 or 10% per annum interest rates for deposits. And I'm not sure if you're getting that feedback, or is that for me?
There's a bit of disturbance somewhere, but continue. Keep on talking. We will.
Okay. Right.
I can hear you.
Sure. And so the reason it's called premium is because, again, you couldn't see that in commercial banks or any of the large banks in the cities. Only in rural banks could you really find these types of products. So the public knew about them, and it was, again, a means to get the public to deposit in rural banks. And at the time, it was something that we could definitely afford to offer. It was something that we relied on pretty much for our loans business as well. But steadily as we grew, our reliance on them also waned. So we didn't really need to have that much liquidity in hand, and we had to adjust some of our rates, of course, and especially so in these times. Now, moving on to the pension loan, your question there. Again, a testament to our ability to listen to what the market needs or the client needs. We understood, again, because we're at the front lines of financial inclusion, it means that we're at the last mile, really, of financial inclusion. We live where the unbanked are. We work where the unbanked are as well. So we see towns like ours. We have branches in these little towns, and we see exactly what every part of the society needs, including pensioners. So pensioners are those that receive their government pensions after they reach retirement age of 65. And it's unfortunate, but again, I'm going to allude to some of the poverty incidence levels that I mentioned earlier. Households here need continuous stream of income even after they've retired. And this is, again, something that they need to supplement despite the fact that they receive pensions. So we know that that's a steady stream of income for a lot of a good portion of our local markets. And this means that we can actually provide them the access to finance the other needs that they have. Usually it's for household needs, but also for a little bit for medical needs. So it's a balance of both. And you would have a typical household with multi-generations living together. And sometimes, again, because of the Filipino diaspora, you would have overseas Filipino workers sending money abroad back to home, but it's still not enough because, again, multi-generational families exist in households, and all the expenses for everyone from the baby all the way to the grandfather and the grandmother have to be taken care of. So pension loan is still one of those that helps supplement household finances.
Sure. Well, look, what I think what you're saying to us that you are thinking about a comprehensive, holistic offering. You're not biased by the segment. You want to ensure the inclusion covers every product everybody deserves, whether it is a premium product or it is a basic savings product or it is a pension product. You are trying to ensure that you have offering everything a product as a service have to do for your segment. Very good model for everybody to replicate. So I will now go to Serey on the Cambodia ecosystem, and I think uh, there's a recent report from NBC. Serey, can you hear? Can you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a report which NBC came out recently, and there's a staggering $24 billion gap between financial services, what you need in terms of market need and the supply. And so my question to you is, with this growing demand for liquidity and a growing demand for access to finance, and the central bank has been quite forward-looking in terms of what you're doing, how you're tackling this this need for liquidity for this emerging market, and what are your thoughts around that? How you think this whole world of microfinance, inclusion finance should take place, given the constraints around, especially COVID-19, the things have become far more challenging. Before COVID-19, there was a trend, there was a hope. It has become far more challenging as we go through the crisis. So give us a big picture.
Yes, well, the big picture first. We have a very fragmented observing is that a lot of microfinance, they're doing so well that they were able to attract a lot of investment from foreign investors. And probably victim of their own success, this competitions and so on. There's so many microfinance who come into the market. And so the only thing that was offered in the rural area about more than 10 years ago was only credit. So we're pushing credit to the people without any other financial products. So there were no saving, there were no insurance, etc. So what we try to do is how to balance this and also avoid our microfinance to be too dependent on foreign funding. So we create a categories where we call microfinance deposit-taking institutions, where we allow these microfinance to take deposit from the general public to subsidize their liquidity needs. But because we wanted them to focus on micro deposits so that they won't grow too fast and forget this segment of the market, we cap their deposit per individual at a certain amount. So even though people want to deposit more as an individual, they can't accept more than that. So it's really making them focusing on that particular segment of the market. And that has been successful. We have now about 6-7 microfinance deposit-taking institutions, and they're even bigger than banks. We also cap the amount that they can lend to individual customers. So we already have this kind of large exposure at the banking institutions, but for these microfinance deposit institutions, we make the cap a bit more stringent, therefore focusing them on, having them focus on the rural area. The way we regulate is pretty much the same as we would regulate banking institutions. So that's one way of trying to provide a different products to the rural area, not just credit, but also deposits. Deposit has been increasing over the years. People now start to come in and they trust. The next stage now is how can we provide access to payment services? Because saving implies that you have excess money to save, credit, there's other requirements. But now with digitalization, I'm never sure which word to use. We want to promote access to payment, because if you talk about payment, every walk of life pay, and they have a payment transaction regardless. Right? And so how can you bring them into the formal system and eventually, and not just pay, so by paying it within the formal system, you create a history, a payment behavior that banks can use and assess you as a person, because you're talking about client in the rural area. Most of the time, there's very little information about this person. And this is some of the reason why microfinance services is so expensive, because their operation cost is high. So in the case of Cambodia, you've got the loan officer physically going to visit each customer, regardless the amount. And then when collection time comes, they will ride a motorcycle and collect the payment, and etc. So these really add on to the cost of microfinancing. And so with digitization, so with payment information, if that happened, is that it will allow the banks to use that information. So rather than send somebody for a small amount, they can just look at this payment behavior and say, well, it's $100 loan, let's just do it. So that's what we're trying to do. And what we introduced recently with a payment infrastructure where we allow different players in the industry to talk to each other. So we've got the bank providing payment services for the people in the urban area connected to each other. And then we've got the payment service provider providing services mostly to people in the rural area, and they're not connected to each other at all. And so what we're trying to create is to bridge the two together. So not just bridging the payment, but also people from the rural to the urban. So that if somebody, a migrant worker working in the urban area, want to pay somebody, their family in the rural, they can do so without having to incur too much costs and fees, etc. So we bridge that. We also work with the credit bureau, and I happen to sit as the chair of the Cambodian Credit Bureau, where we try to see how we can use this information, so alternative credit information, to help these small or rural borrowers to better access finance, but also at a much more affordable rate than it currently is.
Look, I'm going to now shift our discussion to technology. That's the last segment we discussed when we started this panel. Now, you have been an inspiration to many of us when it comes to technology, because in every conference I go, when they use the word blockchain and digital currency, I tell, look, forget about China, forget about Singapore, forget about any other country. If you really want to understand technology in the frontier of technology, go to Cambodia, look at the Bakong implementation, the Japanese company which worked with the central bank, and how did you manage to bring this whole partnership? But that's not the question I would ask you, because it is well documented. You are a legend in many sense regarding the Bakong implementation. I have 3 questions for you, and I would like to get a very precise thought in that in that order. First thing, we believe that in many of the emerging markets like Cambodia, there is a huge opportunity for fintechs to go and partner with the local banks so that they can digitize faster. That is one. Second, a part of the journey you are with us is the API exchange platform. And the API exchange platform, the genesis of that platform was that we will find a way through a cloud-based infrastructure where a bank from an emerging market can work with the fintech, create a solution in the platform, build that confidence, and find a path to production to the banks in this market. That is second. Third is the road to production. That once you understand this experiment, once you understand this prototype, how do you get into production and get the real digital transformation done? Given you have proven yourself that you can work with that new idea, you can work with a frontier technology like blockchain, you can build partnership, and you can show success. In fact, you have built a payment system out of the blockchain-based digital currency. Can you explain to us how you can do these 3 things?
I'm not sure I get all the 3 questions right. I may ask you to repeat later. But for the first question, I think that the thing is being passionate about what you're doing. So I didn't think about blockchain at all. It wasn't, the first things that I think of. And in fact, I know nothing. I can barely manage my own laptop and this Microsoft team, right? I need a lot of assistance. But the idea is it's not choosing a technology for the sake of technology. It has to serve a purpose. And the reason why we choose this technology, the peer-to-peer, and I explained before, because it simplifies a lot of things for us. As I mentioned, we're trying to connect banks and payment service provider. Banks regulated as bank, and payment service provider regulated as technology company and payment service provider, which at a much lesser stringency than what we would regulate the banks. So trying to connect the two together on the national clearinghouse or settlement system pose a risk. So how can you come up with something that can allow them to connect to us, but at the same time minimize the risk? So with this peer-to-peer, and this is the only thing that I care about, whether it's called blockchain or DLT or whatever it is that this ability to do peer-to-peer without a centralized clearinghouse, without an intermediary, a third party, is what this is the beautiful things, and that's how we went ahead with it. I think also that because small economies, developing economies like us, have no legacy infrastructure, it is so much easier to adopt new technology. And I've mentioned it many times, and people ask, why is it that, you go ahead with this? And I say, because we have nothing, and now we're bringing something into the system. If it don't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And that's it, we're not going to. But if it works, then it will be great. So that's the spirit that we come about. And I think also it's a calculated risk. We've looked at the different risks that we will be facing with this. And most importantly is to work with the different financial institutions, having a dialogue and make sure that they understand where we're going. On your second question, I'm not sure I remember this.
Okay, let me help you. Give me yes and no. Do you see that Salai said to Global FinTech, go to Cambodia, find an opportunity? Is it a yes or no?
I would say a yes.
Okay, that's a big yes. Now, if they go there, we have a platform called API Exchange, and imagine there in that platform, do they have a chance to work with your banks to that platform? And is there an appetite in Cambodia for the banks to do prototypes, experiment, and hopefully they can get into production? That's the question.
Okay. For banks, as I mentioned, there's a lot of foreign subsidiaries. And in terms of number, I'm not talking about total asset. In terms of number, 80% are foreign subsidiaries. So those will follow their parent banks' direction, strategies on tax or whatever that is. So I'm quite hopeless with that. I can't push anything. But for the local banks, they're really eager to explore the new technologies, a new way of providing their services, because obviously they feel that they're now in a very stringent competition with the foreign bank. So in terms of opportunity for foreign tech players to work with in Cambodia, cooperate with the banks here, I do think that there is plenty of opportunities. The thing is, they need to understand the market, and we have quite a unique market. And I mean, more exercise needs to be done, more homework needs to be done on Cambodia.
Okay. So I'll take the response as yes. If you are an API exchange, if you are a fintech, do come to Cambodia and find a way to work. Okay, good. So that's an invitation to the global fintech if you are hearing us. Now switching myself to Tanya. Tanya, you're still with us, right? I can see you, but I hope. Tanya, can you hear me? Yes, good.
Yes, I can.
So I know Cantilan, I know your bank is part of the APIX platform, and Cantilan Bank is one of the showcase bank we have from Philippines, given you are a rural bank. Now the question for you, I'll do a yes and no for you, that do you believe fintech should come to Philippines and work with the rural banks? Yes or no?
Yes.
Good.
Definitively.
Absolutely. Great. I hope the people are watching this, and if they're not, we'll get them watch soon. And the second question is, I'm assuming they're sitting on the API Exchange platform, and you yourself understand the platform now, given you have gone through that journey. Should they use that platform and find a path to work with the rural banks in Philippines and build a lot of experiments?
Yes.
And any insights you can share on that whole experiment journey?
Okay, I will now speak about the challenges that led us actually to APIX and what allowed us to leverage off of the resources that APIX actually represented and how we got to where we are now. So, but I will have to talk a little bit about our journey, our digital transformation journey. Took a lot of effort on our part, a lot of resources, a lot of time. In 2015, we began our IT risk assessment so that we could form our IT strategic plan. We wanted to see if our legacy core banking systems could still fit our needs for the future. And when we decided that that wasn't for us, there was an opportunity for us in the Philippines at the time because of the regulatory environment that was very conducive to it, there was a push towards cloud, and we decided that this is something that we would explore. Again, as Serey had said, it's not for the technology itself, but really it was for the benefits that came with cloud. So we wanted to be more responsive to the market. We needed scale because we had grand ambitions as well. We knew that using our on-premise systems would really, limit us to a degree. And it did limit us, especially when we were branching out to other areas that required a lot of IT infrastructure. So when moving to cloud, we were able to mitigate a lot of these risks, and we could move a little bit faster. So it took us 2 years, a little less than 2 years, to actually migrate to our core banking system, which is in the cloud. And we became the first regulated bank in the Philippines to gain final approval from the Central Bank of the Philippines, the BSP, to move to the cloud, to have our core banking in the cloud. So we did that in January of 2019, but we weren't stopping there. We knew that we wanted a cloud-based core banking system to give us the ability to have multi-channel abilities through API integration with third parties, perhaps with other fintechs out there. So we wanted to be in a position where we could leverage off of the benefits of the fintech market, what they had to offer. And API integration was, we felt, something that we needed to do in 2020. And we set these plans in motion despite, before COVID, of course, but we still kept them going, and the implementation was still quite successful. We kept in time, and that was in itself a feat. When COVID struck in March here in the Philippines, that was also the time that we kicked off our main project for this year, and still we were able to do it in 6 months. So in the past, just moving from our core legacy system to the cloud took us a little less than 2 years. This time around, having a digital channel, it was an ATM channel, integrating our cloud-based core banking system to that only took us 6 months, despite the pandemic. We were in the middle of the pandemic, so many limitations, so many challenges, but we still did it. Again, testament to the ability of our people in Cantilan Bank to also develop and grow as fast as we needed to go. And we knew that we needed to have mobile capabilities and more digital channels along the way. So when the middle of this year, we began our journey towards mobile, and that was already in the works since last year. But the implementation itself, we cut it down. So in terms of our ability to be agile, we're learning, and we're learning quick, from 2 years down to 6 months. And now we have an implementation for our mobile that will take only 2 months. So we will have this ability to go as fast as we can, and also have like a test and learn approach. And it's because of all these collaborations, and again, in testament again to the power of innovation through partnerships. I have to say that the advisory services that we received from IFC, one of the founding members of APIX, was so helpful. And within the APIX platform itself, we received invaluable advice as well from other partners and vendors, including Percipient. And in the end, we found our vendor who is going to allow us the ability to have a mobile channel. We found them on APIX, and it again hastened this ability for us to move towards production in just a span of 2 months. So this is again invaluable. Our partner there is Justo, and we had certain limitations at the beginning of our project when we had to do the typical vendor selection process, which normally takes a lot of time. And then when we heard about APIX last year at last year's Singapore FinTech Festival, I knew that this was something that we needed. We needed a platform where we could find potential partners. We could investigate, who exactly can provide the solutions to the particular problems that we would pose. So in this case, if we wanted to have a mobile channel, who would respond? So in this case, Jeannie Usto is someone that we've been working with, and they're our strategic partner for digital transformation. And again, it's fantastic the amount of resources that we have at hand using the APIX platform.
Good. Look, we are almost through the time, and I can keep on talking to both of you, but I have to wrap up. So what I'll do, I'll wrap up in 3 lines. We need more women leaders. By talking to you, I'm fully convinced. I'm getting more convinced as I speak to more women leaders through the conference. Second, we need a lot of fintech for emerging market, Cambodia, Philippines, great market to go. And third, there's a desire for all of you to integrate and build a wider set of microfinance opportunity, inclusion finance opportunity, digital finance opportunity. The way to go, as Tanya, you beautifully articulated, API, cloud, experiment with APIX and bring it all together and find a way to build a cheap, maybe sustainable and more long-term technology solutions to this market. It was great pleasure talking to both of you, Tanya and Serey, and I hope to catch up with you soon once we get our vaccine shots in Singapore. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.